Step back. This is a restricted military funeral. The guard's hand struck Ibrahim Traoré's chest unceremoniously, the shove strong enough to push him back into the mud. Dirty water splashed onto his pants as an official car sped by, stopping only so the driver could open the door for Colonel LeBlanc. The same guard, who just seconds earlier had treated Ibrahim like garbage, now bowed in near-religious reverence. "Colonel, what an honor!" he exclaimed as the white man stepped out, his polished shoes finding the only dry patch of ground, shielded by an assistant holding an umbrella. The officer's French cologne suffocated the damp air, and his gaze slid over Ibrahim as though evaluating a broken object before discarding it. Ibrahim remained still. He didn't even brush off the mud, but his eyes registered everything, including the plain coffin of Captain Mamadou being carried off in the distance, almost hidden, while the officers animatedly discussed trivial matters. "I told you to." "Leave," the guard snarled again, turning back to Ibrahim. "This funeral is for important people." Raindrops streamed down the face of the man who was secretly the president of the entire nation. Ibrahim slipped into the cemetery amid the commotion caused by the arrival of senior officers. No one noticed as he crossed the waterlogged grass toward the ceremonial area. The contrast was striking. On one side, a grand funeral with a covered structure, neatly arranged chairs, and abundant floral arrangements. On the other, nearly hidden beneath a solitary tree, the simple coffin of Captain Mamadou. Ibrahim stopped in front of the abandoned coffin, which didn't even have a national flag draped over it. A small faded photo rested on the cheap wood, shielded from the rain by a piece of transparent plastic. The name on the identification plate was misspelled, Captain Mamadou. Not even his name was shown respect. Meanwhile, 6 soldiers ceremoniously carried a massive golden wreath with silk ribbons to the other funeral. The presidential card read, "In memory of our brave heroes, but not for this brave man." Ibrahim's eyes followed the wreath as it bypassed Mamadou's coffin, destined for the funeral of a white colonel who had died peacefully in his bed. A young woman stood alone near the forgotten coffin, her tears blending with the rain. Halima, Mamadou's daughter, held a single rose. When she noticed Ibrahim's presence, something in her eyes shone briefly, a fleeting recognition that faded as she lowered her head again. A military truck pulled up in the main courtyard. Soldiers quickly unloaded more floral arrangements, honor flags, and even a red carpet for the main ceremony. Nothing was allocated to the man who had given his life for his country. Ibrahim walked silently toward Mamadou's coffin and reached out to touch the simple wooden surface. His fingers had barely brushed it when a stiffly postured lieutenant appeared at his side like an unwelcome shadow. "Sir, this area is restricted to general visitors," he said with false politeness, deliberately positioning his body to block access to the coffin. Ibrahim remained silent, his eyes fixed on Mamadou's faded portrait. The lieutenant cleared his throat, irritation growing at the lack of response. "Sir, I'm speaking to you. This area is reserved exclusively for officials and immediate family. I need you to step away." The rain was beginning to ease, but the tension was mounting. The lieutenant gestured toward a distant area where ordinary people crowded together, unprotected from the weather, while the authorities enjoyed the covered space. "Please move to the area designated for civilians," the lieutenant insisted, his voice now carrying a veiled threat as he placed a heavy hand on Ibrahim's shoulder. At last, Ibrahim's eyes met the officer's. There was something in that calm gaze that made the lieutenant instinctively recoil, though his arrogance prevented him from fully backing down. "That wasn't a request, sir. This space is for officials only. Stay with the civilians before I have to take more serious action." The funeral commenced with growing pomp as Colonel LeBlanc, imposing in a uniform weighed down by medals that had never seen real combat, took his position at the microphone. The front rows were filled exclusively with high-ranking officers, their white faces a stark contrast against the African earth beneath their feet. LeBlanc's booming voice echoed through the loudspeakers installed only in the ceremony's elite section. "Today we gather to honor the true soldiers who fell in the line of sacred military duty. Those who truly make a difference in our institution," he proclaimed solemnly, adjusting his decorations. Ibrahim found a discreet spot from which he could observe the spectacle of historical erasure unfolding before him. He stood quietly, absorbing each word laden with hypocrisy. Our glorious army values and recognizes only those who truly stand out, those who leave a permanent mark on the military history of the nation, Leblanc continued, never once directing his gaze toward Mamadou's solitary coffin, as if the body did not exist in the same space. Throughout the 10-minute speech, no mention was made of Mamadou's specific sacrifice. No African name was spoken with respect. Only empty abstractions about honor and duty, while the true hero was systematically erased from the official narrative. The homeland eternally remembers those who made a true difference. The homeland naturally forgets those who do not assert themselves or lack historical relevance, Leblanc declared with a cold smile. Ibrahim closed his eyes momentarily, controlling his breath as he absorbed each deliberate omission. When he opened them again, his face remained impassive, but his eyes held a storm ready to break. The ceremony continued as the sun re-emerged from the clouds, revealing a geography of power laid bare by the seating arrangements. The white officers, European veterans and foreign diplomats comfortably occupied the entire area beneath a large military tent. They sat in cushioned chairs while young soldiers discreetly circulated, offering chilled bottled water and small canapés on silver trays. Across the way, fully exposed to the scorching sun that had replaced the earlier rain, the families of the African soldiers stood or sat on rough wooden benches. Halima constantly wiped sweat from her forehead with a handkerchief already soaked through, struggling to maintain dignity in the face of a glaring inequality that no one even tried to hide. Ibrahim began to move discreetly toward Mamadou's daughter, but before he could reach her, an aide-de-camp stepped into his path with an arrogant expression. "Sir, I must inform you that you are clearly in the wrong section of the ceremony," he said condescendingly, glancing Ibrahim up and down, noting his simple clothing. Ibrahim simply observed the man without responding, his piercing eyes causing the aide to slightly soften his authoritarian tone. "This area is exclusively for official guests and authorized persons. All other attendees must remain in the designated area back there," he explained, pointing to the sun-exposed space where Halima and other African families waited like second-class citizens. Without waiting for a response, the aide placed his hand on Ibrahim's back and gave a slight push, a calculated gesture meant to humiliate without seeming overtly aggressive. "Please cooperate immediately. You are clearly in the wrong sector, and your presence here is inappropriate." Ibrahim did not physically resist being escorted out of the privileged area. However, his eyes methodically recorded every detail of that institutionalized segregation, each small humiliation adding up like drops before the devastating flood that was to come. Ibrahim managed to position himself discreetly near the row where Halima stood alone in her grief. He did not speak to her nor identify himself. He simply remained there as a silent presence, while two officers in immaculate uniforms chatted casually just a few steps away, their voices loud enough to be heard, as if the people around them were invisible. "So who exactly is the deceased in that simpler coffin over there in the corner?" asked the younger officer, nodding carelessly toward Mamadou's casket. The older officer glanced quickly at the ceremony program with evident disinterest before replying. "According to this, some captain from the regional battalion. Mamadou doesn't really make much difference. Those names all sound the same anyway." "And what exactly did he do to deserve a formal military funeral?" the young officer pressed, adjusting his perfectly aligned tie. The older officer shrugged with a smirk curling his lips. "From what I heard, the poor fool died trying to play the hero during that messy attack at the presidential palace. Apparently, he threw himself in front of someone during the shooting. No one really remembers who he was before that. And they don't even know who he supposedly saved with that sacrifice. Probably some insignificant government bureaucrat. Nothing really important. A noble gesture, but completely wasted if you ask me," he concluded, and both men chuckled quietly, as if sharing a private joke. Ibrahim remained perfectly still as he listened to their words, only his deep, controlled breathing revealing the storm within. His eyes locked onto the simple cross atop the casket, where the name was misspelled, Captain Mamadou. A single letter missing from the surname of the man who had given his life to save an entire nation. With deliberately slow movements, Ibrahim reached out and touched the poorly carved letters on the cheap wood, feeling each spelling error like a sharp blade against the memory of the true hero. The ceremony continued with full military solemnity as a high-ranking officer took the microphone for the individual tributes. In a grave, measured tone, he began to read the names of the fallen soldiers, each mention followed by a detailed biography highlighting achievements, honors received, and information about the family left behind. Lieutenant Colonel Philippe Moreau, 30 years of exemplary service to the nation, awarded 2 medals of valor in international operations, leaves behind a wife and 3 children who will receive a special pension for his extraordinary contribution. Ibrahim turned his gaze to Halima, who stood with her face wet from silent tears. Her eyes reflected the fragile hope of hearing her father's name spoken with the same respect and detail, a hope that would soon prove in vain. Captain Jean Laurent, officer of the Special Forces, personally decorated by the Minister of Defense for his exceptional performance during the joint operation on the southern border, leaves behind a legacy of heroism that will be immortalized in our military academy. With discreet movements, Ibrahim managed to obtain a copy of the official program. His eyes scanned the list of names methodically until he found, almost hidden among the last entries, only a minimal reference. Captain M. No full surname, no details, no story. A footnote treated as mere bureaucratic formality, an obligation fulfilled with the least effort possible. A muffled sob escaped Halima's lips when it became clear her father would receive no tribute, a restrained, dignified cry that echoed Ibrahim's increasingly heavy silence. For another 20 minutes, names continued to be proclaimed with reverence. Personal stories were told with moving details, elaborate praises were woven, and memories were carefully preserved in thoughtfully chosen words for every officer except Captain Jacques Mamadou. The sun reached its highest point in the African sky, casting relentless heat over the military cemetery. African families sweated profusely in the unshaded area, uncomfortable in their formal clothes as they struggled to maintain their dignity. In stark contrast, within the privileged area under the tent, young attendants circulated constantly, offering chilled water and damp towels to the officers and diplomats. Colonel LeBlanc smiled broadly, a discreet champagne glass in hand as he chatted with foreign ambassadors, as if at a social reception. Mamadou's solitary casket seemed increasingly forgotten, almost a visual inconvenience in the perfect choreography of the event. A mid-ranking officer, passing near the family's area, noticed Ibrahim's composed expression and the intensity of his gaze. Something about this silent figure stirred his curiosity mixed with suspicion. "You seem quite moved for someone not in uniform. Why so much interest?" he asked, his voice poorly disguising a false concern. "Were you a close relative of this ordinary soldier?" Ibrahim finally broke his silence. His voice emerged low and perfectly controlled, yet carried a force that made the officer instinctively straighten his posture. "More than a relative or a friend, I am precisely the reason he died. Every drop of his blood that was shed was meant to preserve mine." The officer stepped back, visibly confused by the unexpected response. His eyes studied the man before him, more closely, noting his simple yet undeniably high-quality clothing, his posture that revealed natural authority, and his unwavering gaze. Something about this equation clearly did not fit his assumptions. Finding no suitable reply, he quickly withdrew, casting nervous glances over his shoulder. Halima, standing close enough to overhear, felt her body stiffen completely as she processed those words. With slow, deliberate movements, she turned to look directly at the man who had just spoken about her father. Her eyes widened gradually in a silent recognition that blended shock, understanding, and a sudden awareness of the truth that everyone else seemed determined to conceal. An elderly general seated in the front row turned his head. Something had caught his attention. He observed Ibrahim for several long seconds. He frowned, leaned toward an aide, whispered something. The aide looked at Ibrahim, whispered back to the general. The old military man rose with difficulty, Leaning on a cane, he slowly walked toward Ibrahim, his eyes never leaving his face, each step deliberate, heavy with the weight of history. Ibrahim remained still, waiting, the tension around him rising like a magnetic field. The general approached. He studied Ibrahim's face with growing certainty. His eyes shifted from the humble man to the disregarded coffin. Then back to the man. A painful understanding overtook his expression. Wait, that man, it's him. The elderly general straightened his posture, ignored the pain in his back. The cane fell. His right hand rose in a perfect salute, firm, precise. As it had. Been 50 years ago, Mr. President, forgive us, we didn't know. Silence fell like a bomb. All eyes turned. Nearby, soldiers froze. Collective breath held. Colonel LeBlanc broke off his trivial conversation, turned abruptly. What? His voice cracked. The general held his salute. Steady. Addressing Ibrahim Traoré. Mr. President of the Republic, we were not informed of your presence today. Ibrahim Traoré. The humble man, the silent observer, the highest leader of the nation. The man everyone had ignored, disrespected, pushed aside. Shock rippled through the ranks like electricity. Soldiers hastily saluted. LeBlanc paled. Ibrahim did not react to the revelation. His eyes remained fixed on Mamadou's coffin. Ibrahim Traoré walked toward the coffin. No one dared stop him now. Absolute silence, only the sound of his footsteps on the red earth. He stopped before Captain Mamadou's body. He touched the simple wood with respect. When he spoke, his voice was clear, steady, carrying the weight of the entire nation. This man was not some captain. His eyes swept over the crowd. This man was Captain Jacques Mamadou, the bravest son of this nation. Ibrahim removed the small black button from his lapel, a discreet mourning insignia no one had noticed. 2 weeks ago, terrorists stormed the presidential palace. 6 armed men, 5 bombs, 1 mission to kill the president. The crowd held its breath. I was there, unprotected. A supposedly secret meeting. It was an ambush. Ibrahim pointed to the coffin. Captain Mamadou was off duty, visiting his daughter in the capital. His gaze found Halima. He heard the gunfire. He ran toward the danger when everyone else fled. Ibrahim touched a recent scar on his neck, barely visible beneath his shirt collar. He entered the room, saw the shooter aiming at me. Without hesitation, Captain Mamadou threw himself in front of me. He took 3 bullets meant for my heart. He looked directly at LeBlanc. As I held him bleeding in my arms, he whispered, "For a better country, Mr. President, for a better country." Ibrahim's voice became steel, and today, this hero is buried as a stranger. Without honors, without recognition, his name misspelled, his story erased. A heavy silence. Cowardice does not lie only with the terrorists who attacked. It lies within the system that erases our heroes, that decides who deserves to be remembered, based on the color of their skin. The system that leaves families standing in the sun while officers enjoy the shade. Ibrahim looked at every face present. He died to save me. You buried him as a stranger. The sun was beginning to set when the ceremony was redone. Mamadou's coffin now draped with the national flag, soldiers standing at attention, the military band playing the anthem. Ibrahim Traoré remained by the coffin the entire time, not as president, as a friend, as a man who owed his life. Colonel LeBlanc, pale, presented the posthumous Medal of Honor. His hands trembled. His empire of arrogance had collapsed in minutes. On behalf of the nation, I bestow the highest honor upon Captain Jacques Mamadou, the name now properly engraved, pronounced with respect, echoing through the cemetery. Ibrahim walked over to Halima, the young woman who had lost everything, who had almost seen her father's memory erased. He held her hands. No grand speeches, no empty promises. The flag, folded into a perfect triangle, passed from Ibrahim's hands to Halima's. An intimate moment of recognition, of eternal debt. When the final gun salute echoed over the cemetery, Ibrahim spoke to everyone, though his words were meant for Halima. Heroes don't die when they fall. They die when the country chooses to forget them. The next day, The National Memorial bore a new name in golden letters, the name that had almost been forgotten, the name a silent president had refused to let die, Captain Mamadou. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel now. Here, every story is a cry for justice, dignity, and humanity.